as we age, we lose more of our fast twitch. And if you think about it, we tend to start to do more walking, more easier exercise, the things that don't really use the fast twitch muscles. That makes it actually even worse. Like if you're avoiding doing more of those hard, explosive, strength-related exercises, you're actually going to now favor more slow twitch. You'll be slower. And they've linked how fast you can go up a flight of stairs, how hard you can grip something, how many push-ups you can do, your VO2 max, your maximum oxygen output, like when you're running or biking hard, to all-cause mortality. It is very clear. Like when you look at the most important things that we can measure to see your quality of life and, your risk for death, it's those things above any lab test.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today I am so excited to share this time with you and JJ Virgin. JJ Virgin is a triple board certified nutrition expert, fitness Hall of Famer, and 4-time New York Times best-selling author. She's a keynote speaker and media personality who was the nutrition expert for Dr. Phil's Weight Loss Challenge. She's hosted 2 PBS specials and co-hosted TLC's Freaky Eaters. She's on a mission to change the narrative from aging gracefully to aging powerfully. Welcome to the show, JJ. I'm honored to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here with you.
I know you're the busiest person. I think I saw that you were just with Tony Robbins. Is that true?
I do his Life Mastery and his Fiji events. Luckily, Fiji I do from wherever I happen to be. I'm not flying to Fiji. That would be crazy. But for his big Life Mastery, I go to his studio in West Palm Beach. That's incredible.
Is it? I bet.
Yes. So it's a fun event.
Well, thank you for being here. I know that our listeners and our viewers are going to love everything that you have to say. I'd love to just dive in and, your approach, we were talking about this before we started recording. Your approach to nutrition really challenges a lot of conventional beliefs, especially when you started. I would love for you to share your foundational belief or an experience that really propelled you to advocate for your now well-known dietary philosophies.
It's so funny. I'm like, why is this so strange? I think it's like, the most common sense approach. And honestly, I was paying my way through last couple of years of college and then grad school and doctoral school by doing nutrition and personal training. So if it didn't work, I wasn't going to get paid. So, that requires you to actually take what you're learning and use it, and discovering that a lot of the stuff they were teaching us didn't work, right? Mm-hmm. Because back then everything was low fat and more vegetarian based and lots of cardio. And I discovered quickly this was not working well for people. And honestly, everything that I've really have, while there's a lot of research to back it up, at the time I was doing it, there wasn't a lot of research. I just knew I was kind of letting my clients guide me. And one of the fun things that happened was I was working with a lab company and I was teaching for them. And it was a food sensitivity test. And what I discovered in looking at a lot of food sensitivity tests and then talking to the lab director was that the same foods kept showing up. And, there was an elimination diet that had been used for years. And I always thought it was complicated, would pull out things like strawberries and oranges. And I'm like, I never see strawberries and oranges on my tests. I always see the first was always dairy and eggs. And then it was soy, corn, peanuts. And then you looked over on the other side and went, well, a lot of this is happening because of leaky gut. And that's, a lot of that's happening. Of course, stress is the biggest one, but gluten's a huge player there. And so it was such a silly thing because I thought, why I'm waiting for the test results to come back. I'll just pull these foods out. Mm-hmm. And at first I was pulling out dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanuts, and gluten. And I didn't pull out sugar at first. But what I discovered was if I didn't pull out sugar, then people just ate sugar. I was like, wow, and I didn't think about that because the reality is I don't have a sweet tooth. If you sat down and said you can have this cake or this big ribeye, I'm going to eat the ribeye and salt it up, right? So I'm much more the salty, savory, not the sweet. And so I didn't even think that way. But that's where I started pulling out all of those things. And I think, when I look back to that first big move out into, getting thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on a program, The reason I think that worked the very best in reality is when you pull out dairy and gluten and soy and eggs and corn and peanuts and sugar and artificial sweeteners, you can't eat ultra processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these ultra processed foods do so much damage to us. And so all of a sudden I'm pulling these out for a couple of weeks and people go, wow, I feel so great. And all those cravings I had are gone. And I just dropped a bunch of bloat. So, reality is I'm sure there were the people that didn't do well with dairy and gluten out there. But I think the biggest part of it was I got rid of ultra processed foods overnight.
Mm-hmm. More of an elimination type diet.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, honestly, if you think about it, I'm not a big fan of biohacking, to be honest. I don't like shortcuts. I think you got to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find so often is people are majoring in the majors or minors when if they just focused on the biggest rocks of like upgrading your diet and moving more and sleeping well, like a whole lot of stuff gets better. But if you think about it, an elimination diet, whether it's carnivore or plant or keto or plant-based, these can be highly effective because they give you a chance to connect the dots between what you're eating and how you feel, which is powerful information, and then make decisions based on your own lifestyle and health goals and biochemistry, which is super important.
What does an upgraded diet look like to you?
So I have a process. All of these things, reality is I'm a very left brain person. And so I think in terms of processes. So anything I do, I always walk it through a process of if someone's listening right now and they're going, oh, I eat a lot of ultra processed foods. I've been calorie counting, but not really, doing quality calories. I always start there. And so for me, here's how I upgrade a plate. The first thing I do is have someone just track what they're eating using an app. Now, I haven't played around with it. I just saw a new app where you could actually do the snapshot and it will take it, which I'm hoping this really works. I saw the Diet Doctor came out with this one. Mm-hmm. I've been using Chronometer, but that's the first step I have with someone is just to get curious for a week or two and track what you eat. And what's fun about that is even with no instructions, you have someone track what they eat for a week, they're just become way more aware, right? The next thing I have someone do to upgrade their plate is to look at how much protein they need, which I guess maybe the protein I think that you need is controversial, although it's amazing to me that it is. I mean, anyone trying to base their dietary goals on the food guide plate or whatever it is now, I think it's a My Plate, used to be the pyramid. I remember I was a Subway spokesperson years ago. And the first thing that I was trying to do was they wanted to use the American Diabetic Association guidelines for their meals. And I go, but this would give someone diabetes if they followed it. Like, why would we do this? This makes no sense. And I think the same way on protein. The idea that we need the same amount of protein throughout our life makes no sense. And the idea that we wouldn't, we've got to base it, obviously, not in percentages, but on our body and understand that we need more as we age. So I like to start first with that. And the reason I like to start with protein first and really optimizing it and having people eat it first is I know that if we start to increase your protein, that you will be more satiated and more satisfied. I see both of those things because they're different. There's the hunger and then there's the cravings. And I find it shuts down both of those. There's also cool research showing that people who eat protein first tend to make better food choices. We also have the thermic effect of protein being better than fats or carbs. So in a vacuum, if you increased your protein at the expense of fat or carbohydrates, you would start to lose a little bit. Now, it's not huge amounts, but everything counts, right? And then also it gives you better blood sugar control. So I start with that. That's my next step. The step after that is to go, all right, let's start to, and I had a great nutrition mentor early on who was like, I love to add before I take away. So if the next thing we did, we've now added more protein and you're not as hungry, so you're pushing some things out. We don't even have to tell you to do it. You will. But if the next thing you said was, let's make sure you're getting 5 to 10 servings of non-starchy vegetables in a day and 2 servings of fruit, ideally berries. Same thing. If you ate your protein first, then added that stuff in, naturally some other things are going to go because you're just too full, right?
Mhm.
And so that's what I do really to focus on upgrading the plate. Then I'll start to look at things like, where are we getting your fats from? Because, just making an oil change can be very, very positive for reducing inflammation, improving satiety. So that's the next level. But those are the big rocks that I like to focus on, because I find if we do those, quite often we don't have to even go further. Like, you'll naturally start to restrict calories, just your hunger mechanism's working. It's why we're going on GLP-1 agonist drugs, is we need the GLP-1, and protein and fiber are going to help there.
I know you talk a lot about the importance of muscle mass and maintaining that. Can we talk about why, as we age, maintaining muscle is the key to longevity? And then you talked about upgrading our plate and needing more protein. Would you give some specific guidelines on the amount of protein that we need as we're aging?
Yes. And here's the deal with diets. Any poorly designed diet, like if you fast, I remember I just heard this from Dr. Donald Layman, who said, fasting for 3 days, about 50% of your weight loss will be from muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Any poorly designed diet will cause anywhere from 25 to 40% muscle loss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the medication, it's the poorly designed diet that's at fault for any of these things.
Right.
No one should ever go on a diet unless they are going to prioritize protein and do resistance training, whether they're using a weight loss drug or not. Mm-hmm. It will have the same effect. So this is super duper important. And, I would argue that the first thing we should always focus on is improving our quality of our muscle, because if we improve the quality of our muscle, we become more insulin sensitive, mm-hmm. which means that it's going to be easier for us to use stored body fat for fuel, and we won't be as hungry because we won't have that issue with blood glucose not being able to, being trapped in the cells and we can't get to it. So, as far as what to eat here, and by the way, it's not just that side. When you look at building muscle, you've got the protein side and you've got the resistance training side. You need to do both. My whole background was exercise physiology, so that's really much more my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. I started studying nutrition because all my clients were asking me nutrition questions, and I was like, I better go to school, and learn this stuff. So as far as protein goes, and I think that was the first question, right?
Yes.
Okay. So to build muscle, I think everybody's heard the stats now is, somewhere around age 30, 40, we start to lose muscle. What happens is in our teens and 20s, we build muscle through hormones. So it's way easier. It's why you can get away with, being a vegan in your 20s and still be fine, and start to struggle more in your 30s unless you really know how to design that diet correctly. So starting somewhere 30 plus, we lose up to 1% of our muscle every year, 2 to 4% of our strength, 6 to 8% of our power. And I say that because it's actually the strength and power that are the real problems. That's where we end up with injury risks. The way you have to offset this is we actually need more protein as we age, and really quality protein, because we're looking for a specific essential amino acid in that protein called leucine at a specific amount, 2.5 or higher. And I don't think they really know conclusively now how much you need at which age to trigger muscle protein synthesis. And some of that would also have to do with, what kind of quality muscle you have. But it's going to be at least 2.5 grams, so somewhere around like a 4 to 5 ounce chicken breast, to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Mm-hmm. So you need that in combination with doing resistance training in order to basically hold on to or build muscle as you age. So for protein sources, really this is where animal protein is going to be the most effective. And again, I'm going to quote Dr. Donald Layman again, who's an amazing protein researcher, because when he said this, I went, well, there's an easy way to see it. When you're eating animal protein, seafood protein, you've got amino acids. We're eating protein for the amino acids, just like we're eating fat for the essential fatty acids. We're eating protein for our 9 essential amino acids that we can then make the other 11 amino acids from those. Mm-hmm. And when you're eating protein, about 50% of it may be those essential amino acids, depending on the quality of the protein. If you're eating something that's more plant-based, there's probably a lot more fiber in it. So you're going to have lower digestibility, lower bioavailability, and you do not have the same types of amino acids, essential amino acids percentages that you do in animal protein. Animal proteins, essential amino acids, are built so that they can rebuild animals. Plant amino acid profiles are built to rebuild the plant. And so just when he said that, I go, that just makes so much sense. Doesn't mean that you can't on a plant-based diet get what you need, but there's some things you're going to have to think about in order to do that. So you're eating your protein throughout the day. I have people eat 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. Generally, I like to do that in about 3 meals a day because it's easier to do. Some guys, like when I worked with, I helped Brandon Routh get ready for Superman Returns. We did 4 meals a day because he was training and I needed to make sure he got in what he needed. And he's, 220 pounds. Mm-hmm. So the baseline is 100 grams of protein a day, 30 to 40 grams at each meal. But I'll tend to do I'm 140, so I do more like 40 to 50 grams at each meal for me. And that seems to work well. And that can be things like if you're not dairy intolerant, Greek style yogurt or whey protein powder, wild fish, grass-fed and finished beef and lamb, pastured chicken, pastured pork, eggs and egg whites. If you're not intolerant to eggs, pastured eggs. Generally, if you want to get enough protein because of the fat content in the yolk, I'll do a egg white combo. If you are a vegan or plant-based, I will add in some protein powder, like a pea protein powder as well to help. If you don't have thyroid issues and soy issues, then you can use some organic soy fermented. And again, if you're plant-based, that's where I have to really focus. And a lot of times what I'll do there, or with someone who's older and their appetite's down, is I'll use some essential amino acids to kind of augment and spike their meal to make sure they're getting what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is tricky. And It's tricky because, like you said, as we age, we need to have more protein. That's usually when our appetite drops down.
That's why I have people eat protein first, because I'll hear so often, I just got too full. I'm like, yeah, because you sat down at that meal, you had that salad with the dried fruit and the glazed nuts and the raspberry vinaigrette, little sundae, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had bread, and then you got to your meal, and then you were full. So what if we just skipped that and just had the meal and started with your protein first and then saw what else and then went next to your non-starchy vegetables, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, I saw you have a video on Instagram, which if you guys aren't following JJ, you definitely should. And you had a video of, I think it was your husband, and he had a baked potato on his plate. And you took the baked potato and you handed him a steak. Yeah. And then you gave the baked potato back.
I was speaking at an event and then I went to dinner and I'd done the whole thing, eat protein first. And one of the women sitting with me at the table was like the poster child for this, right? She was a skinny fat, which my husband was skinny fat. We've recovered that, but skinny fat, meaning normal weight, but more body fat, not enough muscle, or what we'd call sarcopenic, low muscle mass. And in her early 60s, right? And so I watch her, I sit down, watch her have a glass of wine, have some appetizers. Appetizers, most of them at the restaurants are just carbs and fat, right? Then she had a salad. And then her dinner came and she ordered eggplant. So I'm looking at her and she's looking at me waiting. And I ordered this big steak because I was planning to take some home for the next morning, right, for breakfast. And so I cut off 4 ounces of my steak and handed it on over to her. And I'm like, here you go. And she's like, but I've got this eggplant here. I go, that's great. Eat that next. Have the steak. She goes, but I'm getting full. I'm like, exactly. Eat this first. She's like, you're protein shaming me. I go, you'll thank me later. But she was also one that I was like, give me your address. I'm going to send you essential amino acids because I can see exactly what you're doing. And let's just make sure, we're getting in what you need.
What nutrients would you say are most important as we age?
I find for people who are starting to increase their protein, they do well if they can add in protein digestive enzymes to help. A lot of us need them anyway, as we age, lower stomach acid, stress. But for someone, especially if they are moving from plant-based to animal protein, I like to have them using a protein digestive enzyme formula with betaine HCl. Next up, fish oil. And I really love, do you use the omega quant test at all for your omega-3 ratio?
No.
I think, because so much that we see out there, you're hearing all this stuff about seed oils. And really one of the challenges is that we have a preponderance of omega-6 fats in our diet. Now we need both omega-6s and omega-3s. They're both fatty. They're both essential fatty acids, the EPA and DHA and omega-3s, and then we've got the omega-6s. However, it's the balance that's the big deal, and where we should have like a 4-to-1 balance of 6-to-3 to keep us in the right amount of anti-inflammatory state. Apparently now we're like 20-to-1. So an omega quant test is a great way to show you if you're where you need to be, and then you fish oil every day, not just to get you into that great balance so that you are in there, because you don't want to be completely anti-inflammatory either. You need to be able to launch an inflammatory response, but also because of lowering triglycerides, brain health, bone remodeling, reducing inflammation, all perfect with omega-3s, but they're also anabolic too, maybe because of the anti-inflammatory response. Vitamin D with K, D3, K2. I think everyone should be doing 25-hydroxy vitamin D testing and optimizing that. Magnesium is another one. Magnesium, especially before bed, and creatine. And if I had to pick one thing that I think is probably the most essential thing for 50 plus, and if I was to look back and go, what would I do over? I would have started creatine so much earlier. I just kind of thought it was a bro supplement. Yeah.
Weightlifters or
which
something
is
like
ridiculous.
that.
Like if you look at the research on creatine for aging, sarcopenia, bone health, wrinkles, brain health, I'm like, now I put my son on it after he had a traumatic brain injury, but I just didn't connect the dots. I'm like, so creatine, hugely important.
For brain health, how much creatine should we be taking? I think it's different than for our muscle
I don't
health, right?
really know how much it is. I wish I had that research. I haven't seen how much, I think it's like how much is crossing the blood-brain barrier. I'm not worried about going a little high. I'd be worried about getting too low. So, how much are the muscles taking up? And then think about it. If women have 70 to 80% less tissue stores than men, we will get a little bit from our food, but it's really kind of destroyed in the heat processing. So unless you're eating carpaccio and sashimi, you're not getting much of it. We produce about 1 gram of it. And then tissue saturation generally will happen at about 3 to 5 grams, if you're bigger, more.
Right.
And then you think about that and go, well, do I need to get to tissue saturation to then cross the blood-brain barrier? I don't know. So I push my son higher.
Yeah. I've heard 10 grams, but don't mark my word on that.
That would make sense.
Yeah. What about the omega-3 test? Where can people find that?
It's just online. I think Omega Quant. It's an inexpensive little test. They ship it to your house. You do a little blood spot. You ship it off. And it's great. And then you can see, like, I actually was too much the other way because I'm so careful about the oils that I do that I was like, oh, I'm at 2.5 to 1. I need to like back off a little bit on my fish oil.
That's funny. Yeah, I had mine tested and I was the opposite, probably like the general population. And I do watch my oils as well. So I just think you really must be doing a good job with your omega-3 supplementation to
I eat a lot of fish too. So, that's the thing. If you're eating a lot of fish, you may not need to supplement. But I was like, when my son had his brain injury, I had him on 20 grams of fish oil for a while. So, but you do need to be careful. You don't just go crazy with fish oil. But he was in a coma. So I was,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Hey guys, quick interruption to the Dr. Ashley show. After a decade of helping thousands shed pounds, I realized the need for an electrolyte mix tailored to support lean muscle mass and metabolic needs. People always talk about electrolytes for different sports or lifting weights, but what about for weight loss? It's a marathon of its own. Drumroll please, introducing Electrolyte Plus, your marathon champion. Packed with patented ingredients for optimal absorption, it fuels metabolism, supports adrenals, and stabilizes blood sugar. Say goodbye to those headaches and lightheadedness. Visit drashleywellness.com and use code Ashley10 for 10% off your first purchase or 20% off your first subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Back to the show.
Well, will you talk about aging powerfully? What does
All
that mean
right.
to
So this can get into the resistance side of things. As we age, I talked about
you?
losing muscle and the fact that we lose muscle, but we lose more strength and more power. And when you think about it, so we have two distinct types of muscle fibers. We have what are called fast twitch and slow twitch. And then we have these hybrids that can shift to either way. That's important because, you've heard use it or lose it. Whatever you do the most of, you're going to build more of that type of muscle fiber, and the hybrids will shift to that. So slow twitch is just like us walking around, standing up. It's the things that don't require big explosive movements, lots of strength. Strength is how the heaviest thing you can lift once. Power is how fast you can do something. That's where your fast twitch come in. As we age, we lose more of our fast twitch. And if you think about it, we tend to start to do more walking, more easier exercise, the things that don't really use the fast twitch muscles. That makes it actually even worse. Like if you're avoiding doing more of those hard, explosive, strength related exercises, you're actually going to now favor more slow twitch. You'll be slower. And they've linked how fast you can go up a flight of stairs, how hard you can grip something, how many push-ups you can do, your VO2 max, your maximum oxygen output, like when you're running or biking hard, to all-cause mortality. It is very clear. Like when you look at the most important things that we can measure to see your quality of life and, your risk for death, it's those things above any lab test. VO2 max will be the most important. So when I think of aging powerfully, it's really focusing on what do we need to do to start to make sure that we are doing things to challenge those fast twitch muscles. I was recording a video today because there's a little thing going through the internet. I cannot find a citation anywhere for it. I heard it first on a podcast, a reputable podcast, and it was at the age of 30, after the age of 30, 5% of us, only 5% of us will ever sprint again. And I go, wow. And I started to think about it. And I can't find the citation, but it does make you stop and pause for a moment. Because I thought, well, I could only think of one time I'd sprinted after the age of 30. And it was my kids were in a soccer game and they challenged the adults and I sprinted and pulled my hamstring. And it was like,
Yes,
not
right.
doing that. But then I went and took a HIIT class last year with my husband, and they'd sprint treadmills in there, and I sprinted, and literally I was like, I couldn't walk for a week. My quads were so sore, and I went, that's it. I'm getting a sprint treadmill. I'm pushing myself, because we actively have to be doing the running up the stairs, jumping onto things, lifting heavy stuff in order to age powerfully. And if you think about society, they're like, oh, I read this the other day, aging households, what should you do? You should move into a one-story house. And I'm like, no,
Right. Yeah.
you should move into a 3-story house. You should have the kitchen on the top floor, the bathroom on the bottom floor, right? And you have to go up and down and up and down. When we bought this house in Tampa, my office is on the second floor. And I thought, oh, I should get an espresso machine and put it up here and a refrigerator. And then I thought, no, I should have to run up and down the stairs all day long, which I do. And, I have a 17-year-old dog and a 2-year-old dog, and they come upstairs with me too. And my 17-year-old is like, walking very slowly up the stairs, and the 2-year-old bounds up the stairs. And, we just got to keep bounding up the stairs, right? Otherwise, we will be aging gracefully, which means, you're shuffling along, you're walking slow, and you don't have to. I think the most interesting thing about muscle is we don't have to become less powerful. Like if you're using this and you're pushing it, you can build muscle at any age.
What type of exercises then do you recommend as we age?
So I have just like with the food thing, I have a process. I think the most important thing, like when I look at the 3 pillars for aging powerfully, the first is obviously fuel. And I like to start with eating protein first. And then the second one is movement. Now, when you think of metabolism, you've got your basal metabolic rate, how many calories you use at rest if you did nothing. Then you've got the thermic effect of food, of which if you focus protein, that's going to improve that. And then you have activity. And under the activity umbrella, we have both non-exercise and exercise. I think you probably heard the study that showed that if you exercised 30 minutes a day and sat 11 and a half hours, you basically erased the exercise, right? So when I look at this, I want to put them all under one umbrella so people realize how important this is. And where I start is not with exercise, I start with activity. Although for some people, like I'm working with a very deconditioned person right now who is 200 pounds. He's got more body fat than person that we have to get off, right? So he's 200 pounds overweight. And for him, he was getting 2,500 steps in a day, which, by the way, the average American gets 2,500 to 4,000 steps a day. And the bell curve shows us that 8 to 12,000 is a sweet spot. Doesn't mean you can't do more, but you want to make sure you're getting in at least 8 to 12,000 steps. And for him, walking to start with when you're moving that much weight is exercise, right? But for most of us, that's activity. So the first thing I have people do is just track their activity. And then I want you to get to the point where you're getting 8 to 12,000 steps a day. So that's step one is track. Step two is get to 8 to 12,000 steps. Step three, there was a study that looked at people who were told to do 12,000 steps a day. There were two groups. One was just told 12,000 steps. One was told 3 days a week to add some intensity for 30 minutes. And so the step three for me is now add intensity to that 3 times a week. So that could be putting on a rucking vest, a weighted vest. It could be adding in some speed. It could be going up some hills. But what they found was that group that they said to put the intensity in is that group saw that in the other group, this didn't happen. They improved their HDLs. They improved their body composition. They improved their waist circumference. And so that's the next phase is let's do that. And let's make sure that you are trying to get some walks after meals as well. That's my most favorite is walking after your dinner so that you digest better and lower the blood sugar response. Once you've got that foundation, resistance training is next. And for resistance training, if someone's just starting, I have them focus, and I like to say, you're not training to get better at training. You're training to get better at life. You're putting yourself in a very controlled environment so that you can strengthen yourself so that when you're out in the real world, out in the wild, if you have to step off a curb, get out of the way of something, catch yourself, you've now got the skills to be able to do that. You don't want to be the statistic of that broken hip where 30% of the people who break a hip after the age of 65 never get out of the hospital, like die within a year. So resistance training is the next one. And I basically divide the body into 4 parts, but I focus on 3. So the 4 parts are hip and thigh hinging. So something like a squat or a deadlift or a step up. Very functional. We need to do these things in life. People will tell me I can't do a squat. I have bad knees or a bad back. I go, but you have to squat you have to get out of a chair. You have to get out of a car. You have to get off a toilet. So let's do that in a controlled environment and really work on your form. Just like you have to pick things up off the floor, that's a deadlift, or get up the stairs, right? Next one is upper body pushing. So things like push-ups, overhead presses, dips, again, very functional things. We have to put things up overhead. And especially for bone density, when you're doing a squat or you're doing an overhead press, you're loading your spine, you're loading your hips. So it's really functional. And what I found is, just like blood sugar is really a lagging indicator for insulin resistance, looking at bone mineral density as a lagging indicator for poor muscle mass. If you strengthen your muscles, you pull on your bones, you should avoid any issues with osteoporosis. And then upper body pulling, things like bent over rows or upright rows or pull-ups. And I'm actually a big fan of push-ups and pull-ups and squats. First of all, because they use the 4th area, which is your core. Like if you think about it, if you're squatting correctly, if you're doing push-ups, you have to use your core because your push-ups using your core is going to keep you from like having a big saggy hips and thighs, right? You're going to use your core. So I don't really focus on doing much core work. I just do push-ups and pull-ups and squats. So I have people start with just really low weight, body weight types of things where their muscles and nerves are learning how to communicate. Because as we age, our muscles and nerves, their communication, their connection starts to go down. So you're just getting them learning and working again, and also getting your muscles and tendons to work well together so that you build that strength up before you hit it hard, right? Because that would be a risk of injury. Once you're doing that, then I start to progress you from there. But that's the first start, is just doing it light, going through the movements, getting your form down, and then you build on it from there. And the goal is, after you've gotten to a point where you're now more of an intermediate exerciser, about 4 months in, you can start to add in more strength and more power, doing things that are really heavy and doing things fast, so that you've got both those elements taken care of too. And then also adding in a little bit of balance. So maybe doing an overhead press on one leg, or a one-legged stiff leg deadlift, because balance is another thing that we have to focus on as we age.
And so keeping those fast twitch muscles upregulated, we do that by doing those movements fast, or do you add some kind of sprinting in there, high intensity interval training?
That's the next one, is adding in a little HIIT training. You will work your fast twitch muscle fibers, adding in like kettlebell swings or little box jumps, and lifting heavy weights. Those pull your fast twitch muscle fibers. But I also, what I like to do in my perfect world of exercise prescription, you're getting in your 8 to 12,000 steps a day. You've added a little intensity, like that's where I would use a weighted vest. And I think weighted vests are fabulous, especially for women, for the bone density effects. Then I'll do resistance training 3 days a week, all body parts. And then 2 days a week, I'll do some high intensity interval training. Like tomorrow, I have to get on a plane. So before I do that, I've got like a sprint treadmill and an exerciser here. So I'm going to do a combination of some different things to do a hit and sit training, where I'll do high intensity interval training and actually throw in some sprints too. When I was 17, I blew out my knee in point ballet, which I'm a 6 foot tall gal. So it was a ridiculous thing for me. I was doing gymnastics and point ballet in high school.
Well, I did the same. I was a professional ballet dancer. So I've thrown out lots of parts of my body. So I'm excited to learn about the sprint treadmill.
Joints have not been my friend, although I will tell you that resistance training saved me. When I was in my 20s, they're like, you're going to have a knee replacement. And I'm like, oh. So I put that off for 30 years by just being very, very strong. But the way that my knee rubbed messed up my other hip, my other knee, right? So my joints have just been my nemesis. They're my kryptonite. So this sprint treadmill is fantastic because it has a little bit of give to it. So I can actually run on it, no problem. And it's self-propelled. So the faster you go, the faster it goes. It takes a little while. Like when I first started, I was like holding on for dear life. I was in a class and everyone's like looking just amazing, sprinting. And I'm like holding on, white knuckling it. But you get used to it. It's got this curve to it. It's fantastic. Like it just feels it gives you a little cushy. You can run. And honestly, it feels so great to be running again.
I'll have to check that out because I just can't run because of my history with joints.
Have you had to replace anything yet?
No.
All right. Knock on wood.
I'm going strong. I lift a lot of weights just like you, but I haven't gotten into the running just because it hurts
the other thing that I love for home for knees is a piece of equipment called an exciser. And super inexpensive, couple $100, but it's a closed chain stepper so that you can get on it, really good for your quads. And it's easy to do interval training on because you can literally get on it, use some dumbbells to do an overhead press and curl while you're doing. So you've got to have balance, coordination, and quad strength. Man. So it's fantastic. And you can do bursts on that as well. Yes.
I'll check that out. So for you do resistance training 3 times a week, interval training 2 times a week.
Yeah, sometimes I do 4 times a week and split, because I travel all the time. So I'm always looking for how am I going to pull this off? And I'll travel like we're heading out to Dallas and Austin. And so I'm bringing my TRX trainer with me as well. And sometimes I'll end up in a hotel room running up and down the stairs in the hotel stairwells. I'll do whatever.
Works.
Like the other day I was in an Airbnb and I thought I was going to be able to go to a gym and there was nothing anywhere nearby. So I was in there doing burpees and jump squats and all sorts of stuff. I was like, all right, I can make this work. So there's a lot of things that you can do with body weight, especially if you start doing like squat jumps, like lunge jumps, skaters, bounds. You can do a whole high intensity interval training workout fairly easily in a very small space, I might add.
What do you say to people who hate gyms?
Don't go to the gym. I created a gym at home. Thankfully, I had most of it done before the pandemic. Like I have a way better one now, but pre-pandemic, I also had one. So I was able to do everything I needed to do. You can build a pretty cool home gym with a TRX machine, the suspension trainer, a bench, an exerciser, and dumbbells, and you can do a whole lot of stuff. So I think the more important thing there, Ashley, is like, just figure out how to make it work for you. If you hate going to the gym, that's not going to work. So don't go to the gym, right? But figure out the idea of not working out is not optional, and walking's never going to be enough. You've got to do resistance training. Like if I had to pick one thing, resistance training is going to make the biggest impact because it's going to build muscle, build fast twitch muscle, and load your joints so that you've got good bone mineral density. Plus, it improves insulin sensitivity. It's the fastest thing that does. We tend to get more insulin resistant as we age, so it's critical.
Do we become more insulin resistant as we hit menopause?
Gosh,
Can you talk to that a little bit?
I was so fortunate that as I started to go through menopause, I was surrounded by functional medicine doctors. In fact, my 50th birthday party was Dr. Anna Quebeca and Dr. Sarah Gottfried were with me in South Beach. So I started doing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy the minute things started to go a little bit wonky. And I remember being at the gym and not being able to recover. Like, I was like, gosh, I'm just so achy. What the heck is it? And as soon as I did some estrogen, I was fine. But you look at it and go, okay, estrogen's going down. You're not going to be able to build muscle. You're going to start gaining fat. You're going to be more inflamed. You're going to start becoming more insulin resistant. And none of that stuff has to happen. It doesn't have to. It can all be offset.
How can you avoid those things from happening?
First of all, I think that it's up to you to have the best foundation. Like I had a great doctor that I used to do workshops with, and she said, you can't balance hormones in a vacuum. And so while you want to make sure that you've got, that you're looking at thyroid and estrogen and progesterone, all of those things working with a good menopause doctor, your job first is number one. And I think this, if I was going to look at one thing, it's like start working on your stress resilience in your 30s. Because the better your adrenals are going into menopause, the easier the thing is going to be, because you've got to start to produce some of that estrogen through your adrenal glands. So that's the first thing, is get a good mindfulness practice on board. I didn't do that. Wish I had. I didn't get into any of that stuff till a couple years ago. The other thing is really get your exercise dialed in, get your resistance training dialed in so that you've got that good routine on board and that you've got your diet on board. And then make sure that you're testing your body composition. And you're watching your HRV and your sleep scores, because you will start to see things shift. And then that's when you can start to go work with a hormone doc. Like I knew immediately when my thyroid went down, it was clear. And then as my estrogen started, because I started to get like, number one, I was always running hot. All of a sudden I'm not running hot, I'm cold. And, I was always running hot and sweaty. So in a way I was kind of like, this is nice. I'm not hot and sweaty. However, I'm constipated, and feeling slightly depressed, and my hair's starting to kind of fall out a bit. So I was like going, oh, this is not okay. So I noticed all those things and went in, and sure enough, my TSH had gone up. Then the next one, so that was the first step. The next thing that happened was I couldn't recover from the gym, and my gums started to bleed when I flossed. I went to the dentist. I'm like, what's up? My gums are bleeding. He goes, estrogen. It's like, oh.
No way. He knew
So
right
I was like,
away.
and I can't recover. So little estrogen, totally fine, right? So you might see things like getting hot flashes, can't sleep well, but I think the things that I had for symptoms weren't things that you might think about, like not being able to recover well from the gym, right? I mean, we know the obvious ones, But I was just with a girlfriend 2 weeks ago, and we went to stay at a spa before we were putting on an event together. And she comes in, she goes, I am just so miserable. I've gained weight. I'm so anxious. I don't know what the heck's going on. And I'm like, how old are you? She goes, 46. I go, are your periods regular? She goes, no. I'm like, hello, come on. Like immediately went in, started working with the doctor. Like, and I mean, actually, I guess, yeah, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now she's on a little progesterone with estrogen, feels like a new woman. So, that's one of the big key takeaways that thankfully is finally coming out is, and my friends helped me early on, is like, when you start to feel bad, start to work with hormones on it. You don't need to suffer, but you want to be able to use the least amount possible. So that means there's no margin for error. All the stuff you could get away with in your 20s, maybe even to your 30s, can't do that anymore. Staying out too late, drinking a bunch, eating wrong, fasting, any of that kind of stuff will throw you over during this time. Fasting as you're going through this stuff, I don't think is a good idea here.
Have you had to shift how you've eaten over the years now that you've transitioned into this stage? How has your nutrition had to shift as well?
So I've always been a happy protein eater. Like that was always what made me feel best. I had a brief time in my 20s when I thought I should be a vegan. That did not work out. Yeah, we are like that too. The challenge is I was in LA in the 80s when everything was eat low fat. And I was also working out at the Pritikin Center. So it was vegetarian, eat low fat. I tend to be someone of like, well, if a little bit's good, I'll just go to 10 grams. Like it was eat 10% fat. I was like, I'm going to see if I can eat 10 grams fat a day. So I was basically like a living on carbs. I can't believe I made it through that. I basically had a diet of fat-free frozen yogurt. So it wasn't totally until I went vegan, and then I kicked that out too. But it was like, just basically bagels and fat-free frozen yogurt and fat-free cream cheese and skim milk lattes. I mean, just disaster.
I was right there with you. Mine was candy corn with the frozen
mine was
yogurt,
licorice.
Though, so I went.
I get it because carbs, sugar doesn't make you fat. Fat makes you fat. Remember that?
No,
I was like, but
right.
somehow, I mean, I remember I have very low body fat naturally. And for the first time ever, I actually had high body fat. For me, I was 25% body fat. And I never, like my body fat was always just low. I never had to worry about it until I did that. It threw me so far off my game. So my diet hasn't changed. The thing that changed that I've really focused on is stress management techniques. I got into meditation, finally, tracking my movement to make sure I'm getting in my steps. And I'd gotten into a big exercise rut. So I make sure I do yoga now, which I count every minute of the yoga class. I'm like, am I done yet? Am I done yet? I make sure I do yoga. And I really focused on putting in the speed and power and strength into my exercise. I got into a kind of exercise rut there for a while. And so I've been really focusing on speed work, power work, which is brutal. I will say it's brutal.
It is brutal.
Do you do any?
I do some, but I don't do a ton because like you, I live in a state of higher stress. I would say I have 3 young kids and this company that I love, PhD Weight Loss. And so my adrenals probably are pushing. And I feel like if I add that on top of it, it's just another stressor. So I'm just aware if there's a lot of stress going on, I'm more lifting weights. If I feel a little calm, then I'll put in some high intensity interval training.
So, and I love the fact now that we can monitor HRV to see what should we be doing. Should we back it off a little bit? So I'm so glad we have that tool now to be able to do. The only time I have a really great HRV is when I go to a week-long Joe Dispenza retreat, but that's not realistic.
JJ, we'll have to talk about that because I did that probably a year and a half ago, went to the first week-long and it changed my life.
So Dr. Joe came and spoke. It's funny. During the pandemic, when there's nothing to do, I went to my first Dr. Joe event in April, and it was so awful. Like, I mean, it was great, except I couldn't figure it out. Like everyone's having these amazing experiences, and I'm like, nothing's happening. And so I signed up for June. I went to April. I went to June. Then I went to September. Then I went to January.
No way. Oh my gosh, I love that you did that. You were
I was like,
consistent and
I'm going to
persistent.
figure this out. Like, this is ridiculous,
That's right.
It's been a life changer. And we've gotten to be, good friends with Dr. Joe, who is amazing and the real deal. But
Yes.
if I looked back and went, what were things I'd start way earlier? That creatine and Dr. Joe are two things I wish I'd started.
I love that. I agree with you. Spot on. So take that, you
I'm
guys.
amazed you were able to do that with 3 young kids.
I know. I have my husband to thank for that, but I did it and it was amazing.
The little short advanced follow-ups are incredible.
I did one of those. And I meditate every morning. It's the number one thing that I do for myself.
Me too. Like, that has been the big, big game changer. So when you look at all of these things, again, like, I really like people to major in the majors. And so that third pillar is recovery, of which sleep is obviously part of it, but so is this. So is the meditation.
JJ, where can people learn more? I know you have a protein challenge. Will you share what that is and direct people so they can learn more from you?
I really love focusing on one thing at a time because, and again, just like we're talking about Dr. Joe, all I did was focus on that for a year to make sure I got it. Like right now I'm focusing on my steps, right? So I like to focus on one thing at a time so that people, you can then habit stack. So if you eat protein first, it changes everything. So I created a 7-day Eat Protein First challenge just to make it easy to just get totally immersed. It's free. It's at jjvirgin.com/protein first.
Great. Thank you, JJ. And what about on social media, Instagram?
Yes, so
Facebook?
I have gotten the things I focus on the most are my Well Beyond 40 podcast. And then I also have a YouTube channel. They're all around powerful aging. However, that's my big focus, everything around metabolism and muscle. And then Instagram, which I've been really focusing on the most right now, is Instagram. So I finally decided to like Instagram and not, get crabby about it. And it's actually been really fun.
Yeah. Mindset's everything. I had to have that shift too. I still haven't fully embraced it, but working on it.
I know. It took a while. I kept grumbling about it. And then I went, you know what? This can be fun. I actually just did some more today. And I was like, this is fun. So, and the dogs usually like to make an appearance in them too. Yeah.
I've seen that before on your page. Well, thank you, JJ. I'm really grateful for you sharing your insights. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, I hope that you loved this episode as much as I enjoyed filming it and spending an hour with JJ Virgin. She definitely knows her stuff. If you are watching this on YouTube, please drop your comments below. I love responding to your comments and answering your questions. Please subscribe. It really helps us reach and serve more people in a positive way when you subscribe. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, please leave a review. And remember, you've got to step up to make the change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. I'll see you next time.